Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Excellency, Sheikh Ibrahim bin Khalifa Al Khalifa, Dr. Sami Suwailem, Acting Director General, Islamic Development Bank, Mr. Omar Mustafa Ansari, Secretary General, AAOIFI, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be with you today, and I wish to begin by expressing sincere appreciation again to AAOIFI and the Islamic Development Bank Institute for their kind invitation to chair this important session and for their continued efforts in promoting the development, integrity, and innovation of Islamic finance industry. This year's theme, Islamic Finance in the Era of Artificial Intelligence, present potential and future prospects, comes at critical time of our sector stands at the crossroad of technological disruption and ethical finance. It reminds us that the principles of Sharia, justice, transparency, and social welfare can and must guide the integration of modern technologies into financial system. Our session today focuses on entrepreneurship development through Shari'ah-Compliant MSMEs financing and the creation of integrated value chains and ecosystems. Micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and MSMEs are individually recognized as engines of economic growth, job creation, and innovation. According to IFC, MSMEs represent more than 90% of all firms worldwide, generate around 70% of the total employment, and contribute approximately 50% to the global GDP. Yet, despite their importance, MSMEs face a massive financing gap of around USD 5.7 trillion, rising to USD 8 trillion when informal enterprises are included. In emerging markets, almost 70% of MSMEs lack adequate access to finance. This reality represents a unique opportunity for Islamic financial institutions to offer innovative, Sharia-compliant solutions combining financial inclusion with social and ethical impact. Instruments such as mudaraba, musharaka, crowdfunding, P2P lending can play a pivotal role in bridging this gap if supported by sound regulation and strong institution frameworks. Allow me to briefly share insights from the Palestinian experience. In Palestine, MSMEs represent around 98% of all businesses and provide over 80% of total employment. Their role has become even more vital amid the current economic challenges, where many individuals who lost jobs have turned to self-employment and small enterprises to sustain their livelihoods. Recognizing this, the Palestinian government has adopted a national MSME strategy 2025-2030, a comprehensive framework designed to strengthen access to finance, enhance competitiveness, and increase the sector's contribution to GDP and employment. One of the most impactful PMA initiatives in this regard is the Istidama Fund, and later the Istidama Plus, launched by the PMA within the initial capital of $210 million, later expanded to USD $430 million. The fund provides Sharia-compliant financing through banks and MFIs to key sectors such as health, education, digitalization, and renewable energy. Additionally, the PMA has introduced regulatory incentives for Islamic banks including a reduction in risk weighted for Mudaraba and Musharaka financing directed to productive sectors like agriculture, food industries, renewable and alternative energy, water treatment plants, waste recycling, and other vital sectors. Most of these sectors are classified under MSMEs. To discuss this further, we are privileged to have with us distinguished panels of experts whose experience covers finance, development, and policy making. Please join me on the stage, Dr. Ayman Ahmad from UNIDO, Dr. Jarmo Kotelin, Chief Economist, Bahrain Economic Development Board, Chief Strategy and Data Analytics Officer at Tamkeen, Mr. Yasser Ismail Mudaffar, Chief Financial Officer, Bahrain Development Bank, and finally, Mr. Riyad Asali, General Manager, Islamic International Arab Bank, PLC, Jordan.
Hello. Hi.
Unless you want me to stay standing, you probably need to
Shift one?
Yeah, just the school. What we are trying to find in this session are the following. These are hypotheses, and we want to examine the hypotheses. Diversify the financial instruments offered by Islamic financial institutions and adopt innovative models such as crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending. Review the regulatory requirements set by supervisory authorities to ensure they support the development of Islamic financing for SMEs. Establish financing guarantee funds to enable small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, to benefit from Islamic financing instruments, as most Islamic financial institutions currently rely on collateral as the main basis for granting financing. Setting up specialized microfinance banks and provide them with government support to help reduce credit costs and improve access to finance. Enhance awareness and understanding of Islamic finance among enterprises, entrepreneurs, and SMEs. I look forward to an engaging and insightful discussion, and I invite our panelists to share their perspective on how Islamic finance can further support entrepreneurship, empower MSMEs, and promote sustainable, inclusive, and economic growth. Let me start by Mr. Asali. If you can share with us your perspective on the topic.
Can you hear?
Microphone.
Yes. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. First of all, allow me to thank AAOIFI for giving me this opportunity to address this distinguished guest. And I'm very honored to have this panel chaired by a very, seasoned veteran, Dr. Yahya, and we are very glad and happy to hear the perspective from Palestine. I chose to make my presentation interactive and relate reality on the ground to what we have done at the Islamic International Arab Bank. The title of my presentation is Bridging the Gap Between Islamic Finance and MSME Financing, and I put the Islamic International Arab Bank as a case study, whereby we started in 2012. There was nothing. Islamic banks were lagging behind as far as MSME financing is concerned, and they were considered less active in MSME. compared to conventional banks due to the absence of the following items. Islamic finance guarantee schemes was not there. We have a company called the Jordan Loan Guarantee Company, which was established in 1995, and its operation was solely, concentrating on conventional banks. And Islamic banks were not included. Sharia-compliant fund mobilization subsidies agreement was not there. Specialized technical assistance framework was not there as well. Our MSME framework, we launched a plan, initiated an integrated framework for SME financing by setting main pillars that address MSME financing challenges and cooperative partnership with supportive entities to provide Sharia-compliant solutions for MSME financing, and focus capacity building for MSME staff to provide financial advisory role and applying best financial practice. What we have done was we set something called Kafala program with the Jordan Loan Guarantee Company, whereby we launched Sharia-compliant scheme, and we have done that special scheme, the Loan Guarantee Company, which was Kafala, and it was approved by the Sharia scholars, although it was not there in the past. And we have managed to mobilize funds through granting companies, parties like the World Bank, like the Arab Fund for Social and Economic Development, and the Central Bank window directing SMEs. And we have put forward well-established team, a trained team in our branches to train SMEs to provide bankable and affordable, presentable propositions to banks to get financing. With also, we have done agreements with multiple organizations to make sure that we institute capacity building for SMEs. So the result was, we call this the triangle of success: affordable financing with no focus on collateral, and financial consultations and technical support and capacity. So SMEs had access to funds at a very low pricing without need to put any collateral because they're guaranteed by the loan guarantee company, and technical assistance is delivered to them whereby they can present propositions that are acceptable to bankers for financing. So this has resulted in really good result. It was targeting mainly the tourism sector, fintechs, agri-tech, health, transportation, agriculture, industrial, education, exporting, and mainly on also the energy and clean energy propositions. Fund mobilization was made mainly with partnerships with the following partners, mainly the Central Bank of Jordan. The Central Bank of Jordan had a window of more than 1 billion Jordanian dinar targeting SMEs financing at a very low and subsidized pricing. Among the best and more users of these funds, although we are small in terms of size, but the central bank, because we are good users of the funds, directed to us more and more funds. We had 3 agreements with the World Bank whereby funds were mobilized and targeted to SMEs at a very low pricing and very good conditions. And we had the one and only agreement with IFAD for the agricultural sector, and it was a success story, and 3 agreements with the Arab Fund for So the products we launched, also we had named multiple products. We have entrepreneurs at the name InHub, micro startups at the name Ibda, and small sized at the name of Badir, medium sized at the name of Wasil, and women at the name of Tamakkani, and medical sector for Jaddid, for targeting doctors and clinics. The result, the impact was more MSMEs are accessible to Islamic finance regardless to the availability of collaterals. MSMEs are able to create more jobs and expand their export market through Islamic finance. The framework expanded to reach more segments such as women-owned businesses and startups. Outcomes are now and help Islamic Bank to benefit from many programs of BJ financing during pandemic and so on and so forth. learned lessons from our experience was the following: partnership and ecosystems, enabling collaborative partnership between Islamic banks and any other supportive entities such as the central bank, development agencies, and more, creates enabling ecosystem that expands access to finance, innovation, and include capacity building, and MSME challenges more beyond conventional product design. Purpose and impact beyond MSME KPIs, Islamic banks can advance their ESG agendas by creating, sustaining jobs, empowering women and youth-owned MSMEs, and ensuring that financing contributes directly to social values. So the final thoughts: the future of Islamic banking lies not in how much we lend, but in how deeply our financing empowers people to stand on their own. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Iyad Asali. Very insightful. And I must say that I'm a bit biased to the Arab Bank Group, although they don't have the IIIP in Palestine, not yet. We've been calling upon the Arab Bank Group to have an Islamic window in Pakistan, but not yet, but very insightful, always innovative. The Arab Bank, I'm no stranger to their innovation. Thank you very much for your insights, Mr. Iyad. Let me pick the brain of Mr. Yasser Mudaffar. How is it at the Bahrain Development Board? Can you please give us a bit insight in a perspective of development bank rather than a commercial?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, AAOIFI, for inviting me. It has been a long time since I joined my last panel in AAOIFI. Maybe 2018 was my last panel. Thank you, Mr. Ammar. As a BDB, as you know, the role of BDB to support SME sector in Bahrain, we do have several schemes, mainly Islamic. We have, for example, to support agriculture and fishery, we do have Qard Hassan granted to fisheries and farmers, fishermen and farmers, up to certain limit with preset conditions. The Qard is zero interest rate, which is Qard Hassan, based on Qard Hassan agreement between us and the fishery and farmer. In terms of SME sector, our focus is to finance micro, small, and medium-sized businesses in Bahrain. We do have several schemes. We do have special schemes assigned to women and ladies who want to start their businesses. We do have support schemes to SME with the startup where they are unbanked in other banks. We do finance them, we do support, and we get guarantee. Even the profit rates, they are very competitive, and usually it is below market rates due to support of Tamkeen with BDB, where Tamkeen, they subsidize the profit to a big extent to the end user. BDB, as you know, we are focused on SME lending, and recently we have started in 2022 to have even depository relationship with our clients, which is SME. And we do have offer now current accounts, call accounts, and deposits for the entire sector. So it is two-way relationship rather than only lending. So we do care about SME. We do offer them online banking, mobile banking, and even granting loans now, or requesting for a loan is through our mobile banking application and even e-banking application. So we had a lot of development happen during the last 3 years. And our focus still remains SME sector, where we believe is underbanked in Bahrain.
Thank you so much, Yasser. Very insightful, very interesting. I'd like Dr. Jarmo to comment more from a perspective of a chief economist on the EDB. Tell us more what the EDB is doing with this regard.
Yes, thank you very much, first of all, to AOFI for the invitation and for having me here as part of this very important discussion. Now, this is a topic close to my heart. It is an extremely important issue from the economic development perspective, as colleagues have highlighted. And just a slight disclaimer.
Can you pass the mic?
Maybe I do the handheld mic because...
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me? Great.
Yeah.
My personal history is in banking and policy in Saudi Arabia, and primarily policymaking advisory strategy here in Bahrain. So my focus is very much on the Gulf region. And for better or worse, I am an economist, which means that I don't always have either of my feet firmly on the ground. So some of this is perhaps a little bit conceptual and high level. When we think about the issue of SME financing, I think we need to look at, if you like, both sides of the market, demand and supply. Fundamentally, the key economic problem in the Gulf today, I think, remains the fact that we have made impressive progress in terms of popularizing the idea of entrepreneurship and company formation. It has become extremely popular, for instance, here in Bahrain, for people to set up their own companies. We are not good at developing those companies. So we are good at getting started, not good at reaching the cruising altitude. And what that means is we have a lot of energy and enthusiasm going into this, but the economic impact falls short of those aspirations and expectations. And a big part of the reason for this, but not the only part, let me be clear, is financing. Now, what is the main issue here? And I think we got some great insights, especially for our Jordanian colleague. Bank credit in this part of the world is still almost entirely collateralized lending backed up by immovable assets. Now, how many SMEs have immovable assets to collateralize? How many existing SMEs have additional collateralizable assets left to grow their businesses? And this is the fundamental issue today. Now, what can be done? Obviously, critically, bank product diversification. Can we find alternatives to these collateralization practices? And one possibility is obviously collateralizing more than just immovable assets. So developing registries of movable assets, for instance, or receivables, or whatever. How can we better develop products that are linked to company performance? So one of the things that we've started to see in the Gulf is POS lending, linked to performance, not to asset holdings. Can we develop areas like trade finance, which would allow SMEs to tap into value chains and the credit lines of bigger businesses and partners? The other issue, of course, is SMEs typically are high risk. Can we better pool risk? One of the things that we've tried here in Bahrain, are trying here in Bahrain, with the help of BDB, is funds that allow you to pool risk. And I think that is an idea that has real potential. Transparency is an issue. Today, as the heading of this event says, we have the tools to deliver transparency much more easily and cost effectively than before. We have open banking, we have AI, etc. And I think that the same toolkit also allows us to overcome or address another issue, which is that obviously for a bank, by and large, it's just as expensive to deal with an SME as it is to deal with a big company, but a big company gives you better returns. How do we reduce those costs? How do we level the playing field? And finally, of course, alternative channels of financing. The Gulf financial sectors remain heavily bank-centric. Today we have crowdfunding, we have tokenization, we have the rise of private credit, venture capital, private equity. These are all needed, not just as alternatives, but to drive economic diversification and development. And of course, channels like leasing. But let me make another point here, if I may.
Please.
The gap is much bigger than just money. And here I get to the demand side, because at the end of the day, it's not enough for us to say, okay, give more financing to SMEs. Somebody comes to you and says, lend more money to an SME, you want some reassurance that you are going to get that money back one day. And the issue that we have there is market forces are ruthless, and these ruthless market forces are among the reasons why we get a lot of new companies, we don't necessarily get as many surviving companies or growing companies. So the fundamental issue is, how do we create better companies? How do we grow these seeds that we have planted? Fundamentally, we need three things. We need business models that are more complex. Most of the SMEs are very, very simple businesses. We need business models that are more dynamic. Most SMEs are very static. They keep doing the same thing over and over again, even though the world around them is changing faster than ever. And thirdly, we need proper planning and governance. Now, fundamentally, in all these areas, we have, again, a bigger toolkit. We can leverage technology to track and analyze performance and use it to overcome opportunistic rentierism. Again, I go back to our Jordanian colleague. I think the idea of bundling financing with other resources, other solutions, is extremely important for us to be able to develop better, more creditworthy, more bankable companies. So how do we offer advisory? How do we offer mentorship? How can we give SMEs access to cost-effective accounting software to better analyze their performance, AI tools to guide their planning, and obviously market data to enable them to make smarter decisions? Now, both these things will have to come together, and neither of them can be overlooked or underestimated for things to really start moving to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jarmo. Excellent diagnostics, 360, and a broad view. From a UNIDO perspective, Dr. Ayman. Yeah, not a doctor, fine. Ayman. Well, it was supposed to be Dr. Hashim Hussein, and it was replaced this morning by Mr. Ayman. From a UNIDO perspective, and that's totally a different animal here. Tell us about what UNIDO does in that perspective.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. So I'm stepping in for Dr. Hashim,
Yeah.
who's heading our UNIDO office in Bahrain. It's a pleasure to be here among friends, colleagues. I think, in short, UNIDO, which stands for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, it's one of the specialized UN agencies that is based in Vienna, Austria. What we do is we try to address many of the questions and the colleagues have raised, whether it's about MSMEs, the definition of what an MSME is. I think different geographies have different definition. Looking at capacity building, looking at working with the private sector to increase their competitiveness, market access, looking at working with government in terms of policy, regulatory frameworks, looking at addressing the SDGs. How can we achieve the SDGs through in working with environmental projects, looking at energy projects, looking at capacity building, as I mentioned, looking at agro industries, looking at the whole supply chain, look at the value chains. So these are some of the things that UNIDO does. When it comes to the topic of access to finance, which is extremely important, UNIDO complements the work by deploying non-financial technical assistance. And this non-financial technical assistance looks into how we can support not only the MSMEs and the private sector, but also the financial institutions. I think one of the key elements that was highlighted through yesterday was the financial literacy, not only for MSMEs, but also for the banks. And this is one area that we are working more closely with the banks. And here, I don't see His Excellency Sheikh Ibrahim, but I will quote something that he always highlights. Do you know what the 3-6-3 model is, or approach?
No, would love to learn.
So banks like to take $3, sell it at $6, and at 3 o'clock go play golf. And this is something that he highlights, that we need to change the mindset of the bankers. We need to change the way they think about the business. And this is something that we're working on closely with AAOIFI, with our partners like the Union of Arab Banks, to see how we can support that. The other thing, the last point from my side on this question is regarding entrepreneurship development. I think this is something that we should definitely work on. It starts with the individual, supporting them through incubation programs, mentorship programs, coaching, until they reach a bankable stage where they can access to finance. But it should not stop there, because getting the money is one thing. Using the money, being able to execute the loan is a complete different ball game. So there we also have to hold their hand after they get the funding, how they use the money, how they are able to pay back. The issue of collaterals is absolutely important, so UNIDO is also looking into de-risking mechanisms, grant to guarantee mechanisms.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ayman. Let me go back to Iyad from Jordan. Let me ask you this, Iyad, to pick on your experience. How can Sharia-compliant financing solutions effectively bridge MSME financing in terms of the mudaraba, the musharaka, the waqf, and all these tools, please?
Thank you very much. It has been very insightful. The perspectives being touched upon were extremely very useful and very, related to the subject. Regarding your question, Dr. Yahya, we are using mainly the murabaha contracts and also the istisna contracts, sometimes depending on the, for instance, for the purpose of when you are financing a factory, you need sometimes the istisna contract, which is like aqd al-muqawala. It's like, so we use it, but the main agreement between us and the central bank and the other, donor agency, if you may, they're not donating us, they're giving us, subsidized funds for us to deploy. So murabaha is mainly the main use of our funds, and usually it's not for long term. The maximum tenor is approximately 10 years, depending on the type of project we're financing, and the central bank keeps on adding more avenues, like we have added recently the clean energy, which is an avenue. ICT has been included with this initiative, and tourism, and medical tourism, because Jordan is known to be one of the top countries in the Middle East in terms of medical tourism. So this has been added, whereby those businesses practicing this type of business can have access to finance. And there is privilege for businesses which are outside the capital. Outside the capital, they get less cost, like 3% outside Amman, 3.75 inside Amman, just to allow for also social and economic development outside the metropolitan Amman.
Thank you so much. Yasser, if we can shed the light on the challenges on the regulatory facing the Islamic finance in Bahrain. Can you tell us a bit about that, if there are any challenges?
Of course, as in Bahrain, we are having, the regulator usually listen to us, and we have even the capital weight in calculating the credit risk for SME have lower charge than normal corporate exposure. So this is encouraging banks to go to lend SME. This is something very good. In terms of, in general, if you look at SME, usually the ECL is, from accounting point of view, due to the model, ECL is going to have a higher capital charge on SME rather than normal lending or retail lending. So this is a challenge where maybe some regulator will have some say in this, make it more lenient in terms of capital charge, having local, let's say, adjustment to the calculation of the ECL. From a regulatory point of view, in Bahrain, it is very supportive. They are encouraging banks to lend to SME. We have recently, last year, they came up with a rule that 20% of the loan book should be directed to SME, to all banks in Bahrain. Yesterday, BDB, we have launched nationwide, between all commercial banks, a fund around 70 million dinar worth for SME financing. We have 4 participants in the fund: BDB, MBB, BBK, and Salam Bank. The purpose of the fund is to finance SME, and the tenor of the fund is 5 years plus 4.
Maybe this is better.
So, as Bahrain, we are focusing on enhancing and making much easier the SME to get the financing through banks. BDB, our focus is SME. We try our best to grant all SMEs where they are eligible to get financing. Yes, my colleague have mentioned most of the banks, there is high security, collaterals, etc. And BDB, we do have some flexibility. We have different schemes, and plus we do have some schemes supported by the government. We do have some schemes guaranteed by third parties to some extent. So we are more flexible toward granting financing to SME.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Jarmo. You mentioned the crowdfunding and these innovative tools like peer-to-peer and others. How does that make access to finance easy? Can you elaborate a bit more from your experience? In the case, of course, MSMEs.
Yes. Well, look, so far, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm not sure that it really has. So in other words, today, we have not yet meaningfully overcome the bank centricity of the financial sector in the Gulf countries. But I think a couple of points here. Number one, I think global experience suggests that it is unwise for us to rely on just banks to fix the SME financing problem. The ability, the willingness of banks to extend credit is being tested by a whole host of reasons. And more importantly, collateralized lending is not always the answer. So part of it is not just how do we give more money to SMEs, it is also how do we give the right kind of money. The money that is ready to take risks, the money that is ready to endorse innovative, disruptive ideas, because it is these kinds of companies that are needed for these economies to really diversify. And in that sense, I think that, so you asked colleagues, what should Islamic finance do? I think one of the questions that I would put here is, can we, instead of trying to do what the conventional banks are doing, look for a competitive positioning through these alternative channels, which in some ways are much closer to some of these principles that we have been talking about: peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding, and especially venture capital. Because ultimately, the Gulf experience over the past several decades, but I would even argue quite consistently over the past 10 years or so, has demonstrated that the banking system, the bank-centric financial system, is good at scaling up the existing economic model. It is much, much less good at bringing about genuine economic diversification, that pushes us away from the traditional focus on infrastructure development, these big projects, etc., and towards much more innovative kind of entrepreneurship. And without this more innovative kind of entrepreneurship, it'll be very difficult to meaningfully diversify these economies. Because fundamentally, if we look at the Gulf economies today, by international standards, they are economies characterized by relatively low levels of what we call economic complexity. Why? Because they are trading economies. They buy and sell things. To achieve real economic diversification, we need to start producing more locally, whether it's products or it's services, and we need to learn to innovate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ayman, you mentioned the awareness for the young and for the entrepreneurs and for the startups. Can you tell us how can we do that to integrate the businesses better?
Thanks. I think the key word will be partnerships. Partnerships with the financial institutions, partnership with the regulatory bodies, partnerships with the SMEs themselves. I think it's absolutely important. Some of the points highlighted today were that, you know, there is a lot of P2P opportunities, crowdfunding. Today, we live in a world where the digital divide is getting smaller very, very fast. What happens in one corner of the world before a couple of hours has a ripple effect on the other corner of the world. And therefore, I think it's important to engage through digital solutions, platforms, engage with the young, the influencers. We know now the power of influence. One tweet can change a course of a country's direction. So it's important to engage at all different levels, whether it's social media, whether it's with the entrepreneurs, with the governments, with the chambers, Union of Arab Chambers, Union of Business Chambers, associations. But ultimately it comes down to partnerships. Partnerships that complement each other. I think that's another important thing. It has to be about complementarity. Should not be seen as competition. It should not be seen as trying to monopolize a market or a segment or a sector. It should be about complementing each other and supporting each other. So if there is a de-risking mechanism in one sector, how can we have a spillover in that de-risking mechanism to support an impact indirectly or directly, another value chain or another sector? So I think that's...
Thank you so much. This is a question where I would just fly for all the panelists, and please feel free to answer whoever you'd like to. How can integrated value chains and ecosystems stimulate entrepreneurship and private sector growth, particularly in agriculture and manufacturing? Anybody would like to take it all on that? Please go ahead.
Thank you. This
and then you'll follow up.
Very important question. It's all about value. It's all about value. And it becomes, in my view, from my experience now 13 years doing this, it creates a domino effect, a positive domino effect, whereby the ecosystem merges together towards the fulfillment of the result that we are pursuing. I mean, when you have organization, Jordan has very good relationship with all the international organizations. So mobilization of fund is not really a problem, particularly from the World Bank, number one. Number two, the central bank itself has a window which started with 500 million JDs. And because of the demand and the success stories that have been, taking place, the fund has increased to 1 billion JDs. More funds come and get mobilized, and there is an audit. The World Bank has come to us 3 times to audit how we use the funds and how many jobs were created. It created value. They are giving us more. Initially, they gave us 3 million JDs was the first fund. Now the total outstanding, whatever, around 120 million we are using from the fund today. And this has not happened out of it's a value that has created value, in a nutshell. And now, recently, 2 years back, we created something we call Sanduq al-Ta'min al-Tabaduli, whereby even death has been covered by this Sanduq. It's a fund which covers death, disability, and inability to pay.
Amazing.
So this has been out now with a total value of this fund is in excess of 30 million JDs in less than 10 years again. Why? The central bank has approved that this fund be given to support retail and MSME and SME. Also, because sometimes, you're working, but you die. What will happen? Later on, the Sanduq also pays for it. So this value chain has been created by the success that was initiated initially.
Thank you, Mr. Asari. Dr. Jarmo, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, so I think this idea of economic value chain creation, proactive development, this is critical for making the SME narrative work in the Gulf region, certainly, or anywhere in the world. Because when we look at the Gulf corporate sector today, what do we have? On the one hand, we have the Albas, Batcos, Aramcos, Sabics that are operating internationally, selling their products the world over. What does the typical Khaliji SME look like? It is almost invariably a B2C company. It sells services or goods to retail customers, whether it's restaurants or it's shops, some construction. That's it. It's purely focused on the local economy, local clientele. And it is almost like 2 separate worlds, 2 separate universities, the big companies and the small companies. And this is not efficient from the economic development perspective. So getting to a point where this gap is bridged, where big companies are encouraged to work with smaller companies as suppliers, as partners, and in particular, and we are starting to see some examples of this, where big companies are encouraged to share their problems and challenges with potential entrepreneurs, and these things then can be addressed by startup type companies. I think this is the beginning of a win-win. And as I said earlier, obviously, once we build these supply relationships, we can also start developing new channels such as trade finance, which today remains relatively underdeveloped in the Gulf. But it is something that allows smaller companies to then leverage the credit lines of bigger businesses, and that is going to represent a win-win for all concerned.
Thank you, Dr. Jarmo. I guess that concludes this session. Let's take a few questions from the floor. Please, can you give him the microphone, please? First one here. Can you please address the question to one of the panelists? Mention that.
Thank you very much. My name is Tariq Al-Ghamrawi. I'm Director and Shari'ah Advisor at Al-Majna Advisor, Islamic Consultancy. My question is to Mr. Muzaffar. You mentioned Qard Hasan and so on. We all know that banks are generally reluctant and dive away from providing Qard Hasan because it affects profitability. So could you please elaborate a little bit about how your model or your experience in this regard affected profitability? Thank you.
As a development bank, we have a responsibility toward the economy. So We are Bahrain, owned by government of Bahrain. We are Bahraini bank. And you know, some sectors are main concern for food security, like fishermen and agriculture farmers are very essential for the economy. And to encourage this sector, both sectors, we do grant them Qard Hasan. The profitability in this case is not the main concern for BDB. Food security is the main concern.
Yeah. The gentleman over there, and then followed. Yeah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, first of all, for a very insightful discussion. My name is Najib Al-Aswad, CEO of IFCAP and Shari'ah Group. It's international Islamic finance consultancy based in the UK. I really liked one of the comments about Islamic finance should not always replicate everything in conventional finance and look within. And elaborated on that, we've tried to do a lot of things trying to stay away from debt finance. For example, I think there was a mention of Qard Hasan, interest-free loans. And in Sharia, you're not under an obligation, or it's not prohibited if you pay more when you return the loan. There's a very beautiful experience we have in Pakistan, where a non-for-profit organization, many people know it, it's called Ukhuwat. They have managed to raise, I think approximately, they have managed to disperse $1.2 billion of interest-free loan, and the repayment rate is 99.9%. And when people were returning the money, they were voluntarily paying more, which is okay from a Sharia-compliant point of view, and made this institution financially sustainable. Of course, that's not like what we have in banking, but there's definitely a lesson for banks maybe to think of using this kind of structure for certain strategically important SMEs, where maybe the government or maybe multilateral institution can help in enhancing maybe the credit rating by guarantees and so on. And also on the other side, contracts, participation contracts like investment agency or wakala, and profit sharing contracts like mudaraba. We had a very interesting experience in Palestine where we worked with an NGO there and designed a profit sharing product based on mudaraba for micro SMEs, and it went very well. But unfortunately, due to the situation there, they had to stop the product, and the entire operation, changed direction. And we had developed similar product for a number of banks in the GCC, especially in Oman when tawarruk commodity murabaha was prohibited. Replacements to overdrafts, replacements to working capital finance, but focusing on partnering on certain projects, not necessarily the entire operations where this project is profitable. Yes, so there are solutions, but I feel sometimes, as some of the gentlemen rightly mentioned, is the mindset. So do you feel really there is a scope of banks to use these products, these structures that are unique to Islamic finance, or what we have is more of a systemic issue that we cannot manage?
Is it addressed to any of the panelists, or just
yes,
a general one?
yes.
Any would like to? Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yes. Of course, Qard Hasan in itself is there, but how much? As far as we're concerned, there is a new product that we launched. It's not new, it's been 10 years now. It's called Ju'ali, whereby there is a party which wants to use a certain product, and it buys it at face value without an addition, and the contract between this party and the bank is Qard Hasan. But the other supplier, which is a bigger company, gives something called Ju'ali, which is agency. It's called Ju'ali, like a discount for the bank to put an effort as being an agent to secure this type of financing. Like when you buy electronics from an electronic company cash, you pay at cash value, but what the compensation is in the form of discount you get from this, like electro, smart buy, you name it, this is huge electro. But the smaller buyer pays at face value at the same rate, where basically he's paying Qard Hasan, he doesn't pay any additional income. What you get compensation here is from the bigger conglomerate, which is not an SME, it's usually a large corporate. This is a form which satisfies the requirements that our gentleman said there, but it gives adequate compensation to the bank for putting this effort, and it's not مرابحة. It is called جعالة. جعله ممكنا فاستحق عليه جعالة. Agency. This is one form that can answer your question. In addition to lots of other normal قرض حسن, which is usually limited. I mean, in our case, in the Islamic International Bank, we have the قرض حسن card, credit card, which is around 100 million JDs for salaried individuals, but not for SME. And we have also the normal قرض حسن for a smaller scale. But جعالة is the answer in my view, whereby it's like distribution of funds between the rich and the poor, if you may. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iyad. Dr. Ali, تفضل. And we have one there. How we're doing on the time? Yeah, you'll be after him. Yeah. And there's one in the middle right there. Okay. Well, let's see how we're doing on the time. We took from this side. Let's go there. تفضل دكتور علي.
تحقيق المشاريع المتناهية الصغر مصلحة
صوت واطي مش شغال.
مصلحة أي اقتصاد وطني إنه خاصة جيل الشباب إنه زي ما حكينا يكونوا يبدوا في مشاريعهم، لكن كل اللي يطرح من خلال البنوك وحتى المؤسسات المالية الإسلامية قرض حسن، مرابحة، استصناع، كلها أمور تؤدي إلى المديونية ولا تشارك في عنصر الجهد والاستثمار اللي بده يبذلوه هذول الشباب. حقيقة التشريع الإسلامي أول عقد نظمه للاستثمار كان اللي هو جمع بين رأس المال والجهد والخبرة، ووزع المخاطر عليهم بالتساوي، بحيث إنه بتخسر جهدك هذاك بيخسر في رأس ماله إذا كان ما في تعدي وتقصير. الآن الإقراض دائما بحاجة إلى ضمانات، حتى لو رفعت في البنك المركزي إنه بدي للمشاريع الصغيرة كذا وبدك توديه على صيغ الإقراض فبده يظل في إحجام، لكن عنصر المشاركة والمضاربة حتى المؤسسات المالية الإسلامية بنجد إنها يعني بتحاول تبعد عنه، رغم إنه هذا أمر أساسي في الاستثمار الإسلامي. طبعا نظام البنوك قد لا يسمح لأنها بتقلد الموجود في العالم. أنا في رأيي الذكاء الصناعي ممكن أنا أنشئ من خلاله منصات مضاربة مشاركة تجمع بين أصحاب رؤوس أموال بحبوا المغامرة، بدوش يحط، لأنه العائد على الودائع حتى في البنوك الإسلامية متدني، فأنت اجمع بين الأشخاص اللي بدهم يعني عندهم جهد وعندهم إبداع وبين أصحاب الأموال في هذه المنصات، حتى إنه زي ما حكينا الآن تقدر توفق بينهم وتجد إنه في يعني استثمار حصل في أي وطن. شكرا.
Shukran. The gentleman over there. Yeah, the second one and then the one in the first row. And that, I guess, will conclude. Farhan, the last two questions.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is Muhammad Nadeem from Pakistan. As we have talking about the SME or the agriculture finance, but take the example of our country. In the absence of any collateral, the commercial banks in Pakistan charge the high rate of return. So how we can penetrate in this area by sacrificing the rate, or what are the tools can Islamic Bank adopt to finance this sector? And take the example of our, agriculture. Pakistan is basically a agricultural country. Total population, total employment force of I think 63% engaged with the agriculture sector. But when we see the balance sheet of the Islamic banks, they provide the only 0.3% finance to the agriculture sector. So how we can ensure the food security or sustainable development in this sector?
Thank you. Can you pass the mic to the one just right in front of you? We'll take the two questions, then the panel will answer. Please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Masoud Bastaki, retired banker. I worked in the field of SMEs, venture capital, and so I am a practitioner in this. I think the problem with the SMEs is the concept itself, the culture itself. For example, I can give you Bahrain Development Bank, and the CEO of Bahrain Development Bank is saying our concern is security. Okay, I agree with our colleague who talked. An SME somebody wants to start a business. If he goes to a development bank, it is not only Bahrain Development Bank. We have noticed it in other GCC development banks as well. They ask you to give them, say, 100% security, and they give you 50% cash. And we know that any business goes through cycle. So you need to start up your business. Then second stage, you need working capital. So when this entrepreneur starts a business, he puts his house, his car, his wife, his children as security to the development banks or to other institutions, and then he gets 50% of what those worth. When he comes to the stage 2, you will see that 80% of these businesses go bust. The reason is the development bank will come and tell him, I'm sorry, I'm not putting pressure on the development bank, but from our experience, we say that the development bank will say, okay, give me another 100% security, I will go. He doesn't have. If he had this, he would have used it as a working capital. This is one. The second thing, I think, is the concept of Islamic banking. أحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. البيع, all the banks, the conventional banks, everybody, they're not going into this field because there are two requirements. These people, if they take a loan, we are loading them with interest burden, expense. They cannot meet it. The banks are not willing to wait. Some of these businesses, we have established a venture capital bank institution. Even your shareholder, nobody is willing to wait for these businesses to come up. So what we recommended, maybe 20 years ago, I gave a speech in Sultanate of Oman. We saw they have a very successful SMEs and small businesses. Most of them, they were at stage 2. Nobody was willing to lend them. Not conventional bank, not the other banks, and not Islamic bank. So what they need really is not a loan. They need partnership. They need musharaka. So the banks should go and enter into the equity of this. I'm here saying we have a fantastic arm, which is Tamkeen. Tamkeen is giving people money for free. Every year they spend maybe $100 plus million. They are not getting it back. We say in over 10 years, they maybe spent $1.5 billion dinar. They could have returned this money through going to musharaka. But what I'm saying is that the concept of these institutions who are entering into this field is based on the conventional lending.
جزاك الله خير. جزاك الله خير. بارك الله فيك. مشكور. So the first one, Pakistani lending. Anyone would like to the Pakistani banks? Yeah, go ahead. Mr. Ayman.
Thank you so much. So for the case of Pakistan, I think one important thing is the technical de-risking. So we have the financial de-risking, but the technical de-risking is something that you need to look at. So looking at the technology that agro industries is working on, looking at the supply chain, looking at the skills aspect of, if it's an SME, what are the available skills? How can we support to develop those skills? These will reduce the technical risks that the SME, when they go to the bank, they have a more solid bankable proposal that they can work in. The other component that we bring in is the grant, that we also provide grant support to the SME, but also to the financial institution, so that they can lower the interest rate, they can act as a collateral to cover the case of defaults, and so on and so on. To the colleague on the question on collateralization, I think one important thing is to introduce you to Dr. Hashim, who runs the Bahrain model for Entrepreneurship Development Program. And this is really something that addresses the concerns that you raised, that, a lot of times these SMEs need grant funding in order to be able to stand on their 2 feet before they can approach a bank for a proper loan. And what do you do after the loan? This is something that I highlighted earlier on, that it's even more important to support them after they receive the funding. So these are my 2 comments.
Anybody would like to? Dr. Jarma.
Yes, I think to the last question, You know the old saying, money doesn't buy happiness? I think it's fair to say money by itself doesn't buy development either. And in that sense, as I said, we need to think about the companies and developing their capacities. And the advantage that we will have if we engage with companies more proactively, and as I said before, we have many more tools today than we did 5-10 years ago, is that in the process we get to know them better and we also de-risk them. And I'm not saying we need to handhold every single company, because that's not cost effective. But there's much more by way of advisory resources, and we have the tools also of tracking the performance of these companies much better. And that is what is needed for us to really bring all of this together.
Thank you so much, and that will conclude our session. I thank really my esteemed panelists for a very productive and constructive discussion. Over to you, Farhan.